Boredom didn't exist for 300,000 years. Then we invented it. Right now, somewhere on your phone, you have an app designed by a team of engineers whose only job is to make sure you never feel bored. And it's working. You haven't sat alone with nothing to do in years, maybe decades. You might be checking your notifications even now when I am saying this. But here's what nobody tells you. Boredom is not a basic human experience. It's not something our ancestors felt around the fire or walking across the savannah. For almost all of human history, the feeling you call boredom simply did not exist. And the moment it appeared, it changed what it means to be human in ways we're only beginning to understand. Let's start with what boredom actually is, because most people get this wrong. Boredom is not the absence of things to do, that's just stillness. Boredom is something far more specific. It's the feeling of wanting to be mentally engaged and finding nothing worth engaging with. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Because for boredom to exist, two things need to be true. First, your environment needs to be safe enough that you can afford to be unstimulated. Second, your brain needs to have developed an expectation of stimulation in the first place. And our ancestors had neither. Their environment was never truly safe, and their brains had no baseline of constant stimulation to miss. When your afternoon plans involve not getting eaten, you don't exactly find yourself staring at the cave ceiling thinking, ooh, nothing to do. The word boredom itself didn't appear in the English language until 1852. Charles Dickens is one of the first writers to use it in the modern sense. And this is not a coincidence because 1852 is the middle of the Industrial Revolution. For the first time in history, millions of humans were doing the same repetitive task in the same building for 10 hours a day. The factory didn't just produce goods, it produced a new kind of mental suffering that humans had no word for because they'd never experienced it before. Think about it for a moment. Before that, what did people have? They had labor that changed with the seasons. They had social lives that were inseparable from survival. They had darkness that forced rest and fire that invited story. There were hard days and easy days, but there was no such thing as a day where nothing required your attention and nothing felt worth paying attention to. That particular psychological trap didn't exist. You can't be understimulated when the stimulation is a lion. Researchers who study boredom, and there are more of them than you'd think, have found that boredom is not just an unpleasant feeling. It's a signal, a very specific signal that your brain sends when it believes you are wasting your potential. And here's how science backs it up, and it's more interesting than you think about it because the default mode network, the part of your brain that activates when you're not focused on the outside world, is the same network responsible for imagination, empathy, and long-term planning. Every time you feel bored and reach for your phone, you are interrupting that network mid-sentence. And this is where the modern world made a deal that nobody agreed to consciously. Somewhere in the last 30 years, a handful of companies figured out that boredom is a commercial opportunity. Not something to solve at its root, but something to intercept. And it's actually working. Because when was the last time you saw someone not scrolling through their phone or anything? Even you right now might be fighting the urge to reach out for your notifications. There's a study where researchers asked participants to sit alone in a room with nothing to do for 15 minutes. No phone, no book. Just their thoughts. But what happened next was something not even the researchers anticipated. A significant portion of the participants, when given the option, chose to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than sit there. They chose actual physical pain over sitting quietly. That's not weakness. That's what happens to a brain that has been conditioned to expect constant input and has lost its tolerance for the state it was built to inhabit. The ancient Greeks had a concept called skole. We translate it as leisure, but that's not quite right. Scold meant time free from necessity, time where you owed nothing to survival and could simply think. It wasn't idleness. It was considered the highest human activity. Philosophy, mathematics, democracy, these didn't come from busy people. They came from people who protected their unstructured time like it was sacred. We inherited that word. We turned it into school, a place where you sit still and absorb information on someone else's schedule. We took the concept of sacred free thought and built a building around it with bells that tell you when to stop. So looking back at all of this, you might be wondering what to do with this information. The answer isn't to throw your phone into a river, though some days that sounds deeply reasonable. The next time you feel that restless, itchy, nothing feels worth doing sensation, don't reach for anything. Just wait, sit with it for 5 minutes. Let your brain do what it was built to do when the input stops. Your ancestors spent entire evenings in that state, staring into fire, turning the world over in their minds, arriving at thoughts they couldn't have found any other way. They had no other option, sure, but the thoughts still came. Boredom isn't the problem. It never was. Boredom is the door. We just forgot what was on the other side of it.